In this video, we're going to learn how to use some of the basic features of LightBurn, and in the process, we're hopefully going to make something useful. So I saw something recently that I thought was cool. Someone had printed a sticker with a QR code on it that encoded their Wi-Fi password so that anyone visiting could just scan the code with their smartphone to get onto the Wi-Fi. A QR code, if you're not familiar with them, is basically a 2D barcode, and it can be used to store information. So they usually store a website address, but they can store other things too. I found a website that will take the name and password for your local Wi-Fi network and turn it into a QR code in a special format that modern smartphones understand, and I thought this would make for a good learning project. First, we're going to visit the QR code website, that is qifi.org. This is the generator that will make the QR code image we're going to use. So I'm going to enter LightBurn Wi-Fi as my network name. Use whatever your own network is called here as it appears on your router. If you don't know what encryption method to use, it's probably WPA, WPA2. And then enter your network password. I don't recommend using my password. You should probably use the one that works for your network. When you click the Generate button here, it will create your QR code image. This is the 2D barcode. If you hold your phone camera up to this, it will read it, and it'll ask you if you'd like to join the network. Now, from here, you can click the Export button and save this as a PNG. Or with LightBurn, you can do something a little bit different. If you right-click the image in your browser and choose Copy Image, then switch to LightBurn, right-click and choose Paste, it will paste the image directly into LightBurn without the need to save it in between, which saves you a little time. You can do this with most images from a web browser. Next, I want to create the outer shape for our finished card. So I'm just going to drag out an arbitrary rectangle here, and then I'll adjust it after. So for the next part, make sure that the lock button up here on this toolbar is unlocked, because we want to set the width and height of this rectangle independently. This lock, when it's enabled, keeps the relative width and height of your shapes the same when you change the dimensions with the numeric edits. So, for example, if I go up here and change this to 50%, it resizes the entire thing by 50%, keeping the original shape or ratio of sizes. If I unlock this lock and enter 50%, it just affects the width. It doesn't affect the height as well. So we want to edit both, so make sure that this is unlocked. So these boxes here will let you edit the dimensions of a shape. So I want this shape to be 5 inches by 3 inches. And I'm currently in millimeter units. So I could open a calculator and manually do the conversion, or I can let LightBurn do it for me. I can click this button here on the UI to switch between millimeters and inches quickly, and then I can just type 5 by 3, flip back over to millimeters, and you'll see LightBurn has done the conversion. There is another way to do this without having to flip between. So let me just reset this to something that's different. If you are in millimeter or inch mode and you type in, for example, 5IN, as in 5 inches, LightBurn will automatically convert that to your current measure. I can also type in 3 and a single quote for inches, and LightBurn will convert that to 3 inches. Now this works whether I'm in inch mode or millimeter mode. And you can also do simple equations as well. So any of these numeric fields here will do it. If I enter 1 millimeter, 1 inch times 3 and hit enter, LightBurn computes 3 inches for me. So you can enter equations, you can do division, multiplication, subtraction, things like that, and use mixed units, inches, millimeters, and so on. So now I have a box that's 5 by 3 inches, and I want to round the corners. So I'm going to make sure the box is selected here. Right-click and choose Show Properties to bring up the Shape Properties window, and you'll see the properties for this rectangle, including the corner radius, which is the one we're interested in. I can type a number, and it will round the corners for me. You can use the up-down arrows or the scroll wheel on the mouse to change it to your liking. So let's see, I think this looks good. I also want to move this over here and make it a bit smaller. When you resize, you can grab any of these square handles on the sides or edge, corners, If you grab the side, you can squish or shrink. If you grab the corners and move them around, it maintains the aspect ratio of the shape. If I press the Control key and drag, I can drag or scale from the middle instead of from the corners or edges. And if I press the Shift key when I drag from this corner, I can drag the width and height scaling independently, so you can change the stretch and squash of the shape. In my case, I actually want it to be the original aspect ratio, so I'm going to just drag scale this down a little bit, about that big, about there. The next thing I want to do is put a small label here with my network name as confirmation for my guests. So I'm going to use the text tool, place the text cursor here. This is too large, so I'm going to change this to 10 millimeters. Type the text that you want. So in my case, just my network name. I'm going to adjust the size and position a little bit here. Get this roughly where I want it. I want this text aligned or centered with the image above. Now, the best way to do that is to use the alignment tools. So I'm going to select the text, hold the Shift key, and select the image. And then with both items selected, I'm going to click this to align their horizontal centers. So if I click that, the first item will be aligned to the second item. The last item that you choose is always what we call the anchor, and so all of the other items will be moved to align to that. So I have my image, the text, and an outline. I want to change the options for the image, but first I'm going to run a quick preview just to see what it looks like. So if I click the preview button up here on the toolbar, the preview window pops up, and already we can see a problem. My outline is filled, and it's supposed to be cut. So what I need to do is change this from fill to line. Now, this would be the correct way to do things. However, I actually want to put this line on a red layer. I normally use red for cuts just because it makes them very visible. They're easy to see. So by selecting the line and then clicking down on the red palette entry at the bottom, I've changed it to a different layer. Then I can set the black layer back to fill. The black is used for the text. And so I can see my three layers here, the image, the fill, and then the outline cut all in a row. And everything looks good there for the settings. These entries in the cuts window are called layers. In LightBurn, a layer is just settings to control the power and speed of the laser, options for a fill or an image, and so on. So to change the options for a layer, you just double click the entry in the cuts list to bring up the settings box for it. So if I double click the image layer here, I can see all of the settings for this image, including the dithering modes that can be used for the image processing. Up here at the top, I can see speed and power settings and so on, dots per inch, any other options that are available for this. Now, for this specific image, because it's simple black and white, we just want threshold. So that's just a straight cut on, cut off for black and white images that are already black and white. Everything else here looks pretty good. I want to change my interval to 0.1 millimeters. Interval is the distance between lines that the image is going to be scanned at. You can also set it by setting DPI. DPI and interval are two ways to set the same number. The dots per inch value is calculated from the interval, and the interval is calculated from dots per inch. So if you change one, the other one changes, and you can see that reflecting here. They're both two ways of setting the same value, and it doesn't matter which one you use. Everything else looks good, so I've clicked OK. I'm also going to adjust the settings for my fill layer, which is used for the text here. So if I wasn't sure which layer my text was on, I can right-click on the cut list entry in the cuts list, and it will highlight the artwork that's using that layer. You can also select an item in the workspace, and it will highlight the layer that is used by that item. So that's a quick way to find which layer is associated with something. So if I select the text, it highlights the fill layer for me. Double-click that to bring up the options. Now in here, I want to make sure that there are no settings applied that are strange, so I'm going to click Reset to Default. that wipes out everything in the cut layer settings in this cut, just for this layer, to reasonable defaults. And then I can set my power and speed values to something reasonable for this layer. But now I'll know that there aren't any other options on. So set my power and speed, min power looks good, everything else is fine, and I click OK. So if I preview again now by clicking the preview button, I can see that already things look better. The image and text are surrounded by my cutout line around the outside. The preview will also show you the order that your operations will happen in, so you can watch the path that the laser is going to take. If I grab the slider button over here and drag it backwards, you can see my cut happening in reverse. Dragging it forward, you can see it's going to scan the image first. Then when the image is done, it's going to do the cutout. That's actually wrong. And then it's going to do my LightBurn Wi-Fi text. Now, this isn't what I want. If I do this cutout line second and then engrave the LightBurn text, if my piece were to drop through my knife bed or something before it engraved the text, that would cause me problems and I wouldn't get the result that I want. So the order is clearly incorrect. So the first thing I'm going to do is check my optimization settings. They're off. That's my first problem. So I turn the optimization settings on and open up my optimization settings box just to check them. I can see order by layer is here, cut inner shapes first, the other options are set. So that was my problem, that I had the optimization settings turned off. So I'm going to click preview again and double check this now. I can see that the image is scanning first, followed by the LightBurn Wi-Fi text, and finally the cutout path. And so that's what I want. So everything looks good. Next, I want to add something to this empty space. What I want is a Wi-Fi logo to let my guests know what this thing is actually for. So I found a website called clipart-library.com. If you go to clipart-library.com, go to the website, bring up the search. I've put a shortcut here, so I'm going to back up. In the search field, enter Wi-Fi symbol and hit enter. You'll see a bunch of different symbols. Now, I think this is the one that I want, so I'm going to select that. This guy here. So again, right click, copy image, click in LightBurn and hit paste. Now in this case, I used the shortcut key. Control V is to paste, Control C is to copy. If you learn the shortcut keys, it's a little faster. So scale and position this. Now, you can just paste it. The shortcut keys are quicker, and it's actually a good idea to try to learn them. You will also notice that this is currently on the red layer. That's not what I want. I want it on the black layer. It's got a red outline right now. If I click down here on the palette, click it to black, now it has a black outline, so it's on the correct layer. Now in this case, I don't actually want to leave this as an image. I'm going to convert this to vectors. So with this image selected, right click and choose Trace Image. That will bring up the image in LightBurn's internal image trace. If you zoom in with the normal zoom and pan, you can see this purple line here is what LightBurn has chosen as the vector outline for this shape. It's a little bit tough to see at the moment, so if you click the Fade Image button, it makes it a lot easier to see. LightBurn also will let you choose a rectangle. So you'll notice down here on the bottom, there is a small black line on the image, and it's picking some of that up, and we don't want that. We just want the logo. So if I click and drag a rectangle around the area that I'm interested in, now the software is just capturing or tracing the logo within this rectangle. And if I look down at the bottom, you'll notice that it's ignoring all of this down here. So you can adjust the rectangle. I could cut the image in half if I wanted to. You can also clear it by double clicking. So if I drag a rectangle and I didn't want it, double click will clear it. In this case, I do want the rectangle just around the Wi-Fi logo. Click OK. LightBurn has now created the vectors and placed them where the original was. So if I drag the image out of the way, you can see it. I'm just going to delete the image and position the vectors here and scale them to the right size. So with this one positioned properly, I'm going to switch back over to the clipart website and try to find one of these Wi-Fi logos that I like. I specifically want a rounded one like this. However, this one you'll notice has watermarks on it, so it's got the iStock photo thing on it. If I copy it and paste it into LightBurn, you can see those watermarks on the logo, and that would normally be a problem. If I was engraving this as an image, it probably wouldn't work. So let's try a trace. So if I right-click and choose Trace Image, you'll see that the trace is picking up that watermark. You can see the purple around the gray text. However, if I adjust the threshold point here, that's the cutoff where LightBurn is going to put that tracing line, you can see that you can change where that line goes. So if I put it all the way to the bottom here, you get all of those stock logo texts. If I slide it up just a little bit, it starts ignoring the lightest text or the lightest pixels and catching the gray. If I slide it up a little bit more, you'll see it starting to ignore that gray as well. And so now I'm getting outlines of the gray. So you can tune which parts of the image you want to capture by adjusting this threshold. So slide it back, hit OK, and now I've got a nice trace. So I can delete this image, and now I have my nice Wi-Fi logo. Scale this down and position it here above this one. And I'm just going to adjust the sizing and positioning of these two items a little bit here to try and get them to fit properly. So I'm going to align their centers as I showed you before. So now I've got both. I can grab the two of them and line them up. So this is all pretty much what I want. I'm going to select this logo. Let's have a look here. Check out the preview. Preview looks okay. There's a little too much white space on the side of this here. Maybe not quite as much on the other side of the QR code there. So I might play with the spacing just a little bit. Grab the logo. I'm going to nudge it over with the cursor keys. You can use the arrow keys on the cursor. If you hold Shift, it moves them in big jumps. If you hold the Control key, it moves them in small jumps. And without any of the key modifiers, it moves them in sort of regular size jumps. And you can change that in the settings here. So I think that's about where I want. Maybe move this LightBurn Wi-Fi logo over just a touch, again, just to kind of center it in the card. Check my settings, make sure that my power and speed are correct for cutting this out. Maybe change this to 2 passes just to make sure that it cuts. So it will do 1 pass and then another pass around that line. I'm going to hit OK. Take one final look at my design. Bring up the preview. It looks like everything is going in the right order. So it's doing the scan first, then the text and the Wi-Fi logo, and finally the cutout is doing its 2 passes. So I think everything looks good. So we're going to take this to the machine and cut it. I'm going to save the file here as Casa LightBurn. And we'll head over to the machine and run this job. So we're over at the laser now, and I have a piece of wood loaded in. I've moved the laser to the upper left corner of the object or the shape, and I've hit the origin key to set that origin on my laser. In LightBurn, I have the start from value set to user origin, and I'm using this same upper right corner. So you can see the little green dot over here is telling me that's where my laser head is relative to my job. So my job is going to go to the right and below where the laser head starts. So you can actually see this. If I click the frame button in LightBurn, the laser should trace the outline of what it's going to cut. And so you can see how it's lined up on the material. Everything looks good, so I'm going to close the lid and run this job. it looks like we're all done. So I'm going to do a light sanding pass over that, and we'll see the finished result shortly. So after a bit of sanding, here is the end result. It looks nice and clean. There's quite a bit of difference you get in the contrast and just the overall look if you just do a really light bit of sanding over top of it with about 200 grit sandpaper. You can also use masking tape or something like that to mask the surface before you do your engraving. That helps certainly, but with something this complicated it would be very hard to weed the individual bits of masking tape out of that. Something like this, not so bad. Something like this, pretty terrible. And if I bring up the result on my phone, you can actually see it asking if I would like to join the LightBurn software Wi-Fi network, and you can see the QR code being recognized in the phone, the little yellow highlights. So there you have it. A little way to share the Wi-Fi network in your home with your guests.